Alright folks, today we are back in the bow building workshop, and today's video is all about sinew backing. We're going to cover the different types of sinew, how to make hide glue, and the complete sinewing process, and finally how to finish this bow with snakeskin. Sinew backing is a lot of work, so why would we want to go through all of this? Well, in a word, performance. When done correctly, sinew preloads the bow's back with tension, draws the bow into a back set or a reflex, and can add a lot of speed. So let's jump right into the project. Alright folks, so I've got a little recurve bow here. This is an Osage bow. I think it's 60 inches overall length, and we're going to sinew back and snakeskin this thing. This is actually a bow that I made a number of years ago, and had it sinew back before, but had a little bit of separation. I got into some wet weather and had some moisture get up underneath the sinew. It separated, changed the tiller, so I went ahead and stripped everything off, and I'm redoing it now. So first thing I'm going to do is just scarify the back. So I'm taking a chop saw or a hacksaw blade and just making some scratches up and down this thing to give that glue a good place to grab hold to. Speaking of glue, the best stuff to use when sinew backing is hide glue. In previous videos, I've shown how you can use Knox gelatin, which is a form of hide glue. That works great, but if you've got some old sinew scraps laying around or perhaps some hide scraping, you can make your own, and it's actually pretty easy. Here's how to do it. So these are all bison leg sinews. You can see where it forks to go down to the toes, but I got these from my buddies over at the Wild Bison Ranch in Montana. We're just going to chop these up and make hide glue or sinew glue with these. You can use them to back bows, but processing these leg sinews is a lot of work. It's much easier with the back sinew. And pounding them out like this just loosens those fibers and lets that water get in there and extract all of that glue. Any kind of old scraps of sinew that you got just some old back sinew there that's not any good, and little odds and ends and bits and pieces. So once this stuff just kind of starts to simmer, I'm going to cut the heat down so I don't want it boiling. I don't want it even simmering real hard. I just want it hot, just to extract as much of that. I think it's collagen in there that you're extracting out, and we'll have glue. So this has been kind of just real low simmering for, I don't know, maybe 2.5 hours, something like that. Just strain it through a piece of cheesecloth and then dump those pieces back in there, and you can cook that again and get more glue out of it. But alright, so our hide glue's done. I've just let it set overnight and it's gelled. It's turned to jello, quite literally. If you eat jello, this is kind of pretty much what you're eating. I think they actually make that stuff out of pig skins, but pretty much the same stuff, or any kind of gummy based candy. This is what you're eating. Anyway, we're going to heat this back up until it's warm. We don't want it too hot, but just warm enough so that when we put our sinew in there, it's going to soak up and integrate with that sinew, and then we'll go ahead and start laying this on the bow. When it comes to sinew, you've got two main options: back and leg sinew. Leg sinew, as I said before, is a real pain to separate. You can do it, it's just a lot of very tedious work. Back sinew is much faster and much easier, and the fibers tend to be longer, and in the sinew backing process for bows, longer is just better. For most of my bows, I'm going to use 3 to 4 elk back sinews or 6 to 8 deer back sinews. I'm taking my sinew and separating it as finely as I can. The finer you separate your sinew, the smoother the final product's going to be. There's some other things you can do to end up with a really smooth finish on a sinew back job too. I'm going to show you that later on in the video. Once the sinew is separated, I'm separating it into small bundles, and then I'll just go ahead and rehydrate it under some warm water and lay it out neatly on a cutting board or some sort of tray like that, and then cover it with a wet towel. That's going to keep it moist while you're working on the bow. I'm going to start by laying down a thin coat of Titebond. In my experience, this just helps that first layer of sinew adhere to the bow's back. Once we've got this done, all subsequent layers is going to be done straight with hide glue. Now, to get the most out of your sinew, to have the most efficiency out of your sinew, you want all of those fibers to be parallel. If you've got a bunch of stuff that's just kind of matted up in there, that sinew isn't doing anything but adding bulk, and that's going to slow your bow down. And so ideally you want all these fibers running perfectly parallel to one another. After dipping the bundles in the hide glue, we're going to lay these bundles on the bow's back and smooth them out. And as we put additional bundles on there, we're just going to make sure to stagger them so that the ends don't come out in the same place and create a weak spot. We're laying them on there kind of like a brick pattern. We'll continue laying sinew on the back of the bow until we've got one complete layer, except for about the last 10 inches or so of the limb tip. You don't need sinew down there at all. Once we get done with the first layer, if we have any sinew left over, we're just going to come back over the top of that with a second layer. Kind of spreading that thing out, working from the center out. If you try to go from one end to the other, you're going to end up bunching up pieces of sinew. And like I said, you want that stuff laid out as parallel as possible. Just kind of squeegee out a little bit of the glue. You don't need all of it, but you don't need to squeegee it all out either, because we can do that once it's on the limb. I think having a good bit of hide glue in the bundles of sinew just kind of helps that stuff flow and blend together once it's on the back. Now this is elk back sinew, so it's really long, which is nice because you can cover the entire limb with one bundle of sinew. You don't have to stack it. You don't have to do the brick laying pattern like you would with shorter pieces of sinew, leg sinew, or whatever you might be working with. But if you don't, if you can't get long sinew like this, you can certainly still do it with shorter pieces of whitetail sinew or whatever you have. I've done a lot with a lot of bows with just short segments of leg sinew or sinew. You know what I mean? I like to lay the sinew on there fairly wet and then squeegee the glue out once it's on the bow. I think that helps it to lay and to kind of almost acts as a lubricant to help those fibers kind of lay down in and blend with one another. So after I was done processing the sinew and separating it into the fibers, I weighed it out and separated it into two different stacks of approximately 1.5 ounces apiece. So over the entire bow, I'll have about 3 ounces of sinew. And just try to keep it as even by weight as possible, limb to limb. It doesn't have to be like exact, but I think each one of these was actually like 1.6 ounces or something like that. Alright, so all of our sinew is on the back. We've got it so that it's not like wrapped around the edges, just running my fingers down, kind of pushing that stuff back up on the back of the bow. It looks to be fairly smooth and even. We're just going to wait for this hide glue to gel, and that shouldn't take long, maybe an hour or so. And then I'll come back and I'll wrap this And wrapping it like that with an ace bandage or something is going to help this stuff retain this smoothness as it dries. If you don't wrap it, as this sinew dries, it shrinks and pulls apart, and it'll end up, you'll have a really rough finish on the sinew back. Once the sinew's had time to gel and the outside isn't sticky anymore, I like to wrap it with an ace bandage relatively tightly. Whatever you decide to wrap it with, it needs to be something that can breathe so that the sinew can dry. Alright, so we're just going to let this bow sit in the shade for the first week or so, and that's going to do the initial drying, and then it's going to take probably another 3 to 4 weeks for this sinew to dry completely. But after the first week or so, we'll go ahead and unwrap it and then just set it aside. You don't want to string this thing or stress it before that sinew is completely cured, because if you do that, you'll end up separating some of those fibers of sinew, which makes it less efficient. Alright, so the sinew bow has been sitting around for about a month or so, and I can pretty well guarantee that it's dry. It's very low humidity out here and it's been warm. So we ended up with a pretty smooth finish just after unwrapping this thing, but just to knock off some of the high points, I'll just take some 80 grit sandpaper here and just kind of go over this. That's going to raise some fibers, and then once I get done with that, I'll just put a little Tite Bond on there. So now I'll just take and put just spread a little bit of Tite Bond on this, just to kind of seal the back, lay down any of those fibers that I lifted through sanding, and then this will take a few hours to dry, and then we can get the string on this thing, hopefully. This Tite Bond 3, I use hide glue for doing the bulk of the sinewing job, but this stuff is nice to start with, and then also to finish it off, because it's a waterproof type of thing, and it helps to seal that sinew up. That's one of the big challenges with sinew bows, is they like to suck up moisture, and that can really mess up the tiller on these things. So sometimes when sinew dries, it shrinks, and you can tell. I don't know if you can tell the difference between the way this bow started and the way it is now, but it's drawn up it's got a lot more back set now than it did. But sometimes, especially if you're trying to sinew recurves, which wouldn't typically recommend you do that, because that sinew's trying to shrink up and kind of attain that shortest distance between 2 points. It can pull off of the back and create little voids under here. If you see anything like that, sometimes you can just take a little bit of glue and work in there and then clamp those areas down. But if you did your job right in the start and got a good base down, got a good prep on the back, and then wrapped it well, anything like that should be minimized. I'm just going to take this fiber here that I lifted and just kind of smooth that back down if I can. You're right there. I don't know if you can see it or not. There's just a tiny little gap where the sinew kind of pulled away from the back of the bow just a little bit. But just fill that in. No problem. So this is probably going to be dry within, I don't know, a couple hours, fully dry, but I think I'll just set it in the sun and probably just leave it there until tomorrow, and then we can put a string on this thing and see how the tiller came out. This bow was already tillered and shooting and everything before I stripped the sinew off of it, so hopefully there's not too much tiller that's going to need to be done. I'm hoping that I can just throw a string on there, string it up, and be done with it, but we'll have to see. Alright, so this bow's been sitting out in the sun for a couple hours. That glue is completely dried and the bow is cool. And so we're going to see if I can get a string on this thing. Now, a bow like this with so much back set can be a little bit tricky during the early tillering stage because it wants to flip over just due to that amount of back set. If I put this in the rack and just start pulling on it, it's just going to want to kind of do like that. So I'm going to do the initial bending just with a tillering string, holding the handle, and just put this on my foot and start bending it a little bit, getting these limbs to roll over. You can see the tiller's pretty wonky. This bottom limb is a lot stiffer. So now, instead of taking wood off the belly here, I'm just going to sand a little sinew off the back. But before I do that, I'm just going to kind of manually bend this limb a little bit. See if we can get it to loosen up. Sometimes with these sinew bows, before you go doing any heavy tillering or anything like that, just bend these things a little bit. Sometimes that sinew will kind of takes a little bit for that sinew to settle. So that looks 1,000 times better, and I didn't remove any material. All I did was just kind of bend things around a little bit and just let that sinew kind of settle a little bit. You know, so when you're making a sinew bow like this, don't jump the gun. You know, if you have something tillered before you put the sinew on there and everything's messed up after the sinew cures, don't jump the gun and start taking material off. Just give it a little bit of time, kind of move it around, bend it around a little bit, and a lot of times that if you did a good job distributing your sinew limb to limb and then over the entire bow, a lot of times it'll just settle in and regain that tiller that you had, or close to that tiller that you had before you sinewed it. Now this limb tip right here is a little bit twisted, so I'm gonna have to heat this up. I'll heat it up on the belly and I'll twist this and line this up, just being careful not to get it too hot so that you compromise the glue that you use there. Alright, so I think I've got that tip straightened out. Just very nice. Tracking perfectly around that now. Alright, so I was going to pull on this thing a little bit just to see the tiller and see how it's bending, but I can already tell that right in here I'm getting a lot of bend in here, so I don't even need to pull it to know where to take wood or where to remove material. This part of the limb here is really stiff, and this whole limb here is just a little stiffer than this one. So what I'll end up doing, instead of removing wood from the belly of this bow, I'll end up taking a little sinew off the back, and I'll just do that with sandpaper primarily. Maybe use a rasp a little bit if I have one that's sharp enough to cut that sinew without tearing the fibers out. And the same thing over here, I'll just remove wood off this whole limb. But I'm not sure how well that stands out on the camera, but right in here is where it's bending the most. So take a little bit of that sinew and then just kind of manually manipulate the limbs. Just make them bend a little bit, because sometimes you take material off, and it's the same with the wood too. Take a little bit of wood off and it's almost like the wood doesn't know that it can bend yet, so you got to kind of force it into that new bend before it really settles into it. When you're scraping the sinew off, you're going to raise a bunch of little fibers, pieces of sinew. If you've got a really sharp knife, you can kind of shave those things off, the bulk of them anyway. Still looks a little stiff down here, but I'll bend it a little bit just to see. Yeah, still. It's rounded over, so it's starting to bend kind of in here, but most of the work's still being done right in here, and then this limb is still a little on the stiff side. $59 at 28. And last time when I had Sinew on this previous, it was 59 at 29. So you got some snap. So I'm going to go ahead and just reseal this back, put a little, rub a little glue on here, get some of these fibers laid down and glued back down. All right, so our glue is all dry. We came out with a really nice smooth finish. Got a couple of little tags that are sticking up. We'll trim those off. But we're ready to put the snake skins on this thing. Now, I've got a pair of rattlesnake skins here. They're frozen. I just pick these things up off the road. These snakes get here, out here on the road all the time. I pick them up, skin them, roll them up, throw them in the freezer, and just leave them there until I'm ready. So I'll take these, put them in a bowl of water, let them thaw out, and then just put the raw skin straight on the bow. There's no need to tan these things or to dry them or anything. Raw skin right on the bow, a little bit of glue, let it dry, good to go. So I'm just going to quickly go over this with some 80 grit sandpaper. Nothing too major. And we're going to take these snake skins all the way to the tips, so we'll just sand all the way up there. If you are using fresh snake skins, just be sure to flesh them off a little bit, knock off the bulk of the fat and the membrane off the flesh side of these things, and you can do that with just a pocket knife. Aside from that, I like to use this Tight Bond 3, and then once we get the snake skins on here, I'm going to use just some legs cut off of some old thermals that I had. Jogging pants work fine. Just get an old cheap pair of jogging pants or something, cut the legs off, and we'll use this to hold the snake skins down and compress them against the bow as they're drying. Some other people will wrap them with ace bandages to do that. I don't like doing that because as you're making those wraps, when you're coming up on the near side and going over, you can actually lift the snake skin or move the skin around the bow. By using the pants leg, you put all the pressure straight down and you don't have to worry about that. So we'll get a nice healthy coat of glue on there. We don't want any voids in here. So we'll just lay this on here. We're gonna try to get the pattern lined up right down the center of the limb. And I've got a little extra here. We're gonna overlap it in the handle, so I'm just gonna cut this off. Now right here in the handle, I'm gonna do a handle wrap on this bow eventually, so I'm not really worried about what the skin looks like there. If you see any big air bubbles under there, just go ahead and work those out. It's almost impossible to get all the air bubbles out, but that's okay. We'll fix those at the end if there are any left. Just gonna take these legs off these old pants, slip them right over. Then I've got some bow billets. We'll just slide up in here, just put a little weight and hold everything down. Now I'm just gonna go back through here with my thumbs. I'm working from the center out, and I'm just trying to squeeze out any excess glue. You don't need to squeegee it all out, but just get the bulk of it out, because you don't need a lot of glue under there. Just enough to stick the skin. Any excess glue is actually going to work against you, because you're just adding bulk to your limbs, and bulk in a bow limb is no bueno. Now the tips I'm just going to leave and let them dry on their own. No covering at all. Just make sure it's all wrapped around there good. And we'll come back in a few hours, and this should be dried enough that we can take these wraps off, set this thing in the sun, and it'll be completely dry in a day. All right, so I went ahead and just let this bow sit out in the sun for a couple of days, and snake skin is all dried. I did go ahead and just take my knife and just zip off those belly scales where they were kind of wrapped around the bow. Did that yesterday. So now we're ready to trim this to the back of the bow. And the way that I do that is with just the fine side of my rasp here. It's pretty simple. You could do it with a file if that's what you got. But basically I'm using the edge of the bow to kind of as a guide. So you can see how you just kind of cut through the snake skin down to the wood. We'll just peel off that extra piece, and then we're going to finish everything off with sandpaper. Spray a little sealer on this thing. We'll be good to go. So we put some sealer on this bow the other day, gave it a couple days to dry. So we're out here on the range. We're going to fling a few arrows through it, just see how it does. But turned out really good. I like the profile, I like the shape of it. Feels good, draws smooth. Excited to see what this thing will do. This string's a little bit small diameter. I'm gonna have to make another string for it. And the brace height's a little bit on the low side, but it'll be all right. Feels good. The thing with the recurves, when you have a full-on recurve like this, when they're made well, is that the force that you feel when you draw is very different from a longbow. I like it. So cool thing about this bow is this stave was actually harvested in 1991 by a friend of mine, Jerry Aldridge, and I made this bow in 2019. Hunted with it for a little bit, ended up, I think I killed a doe with it several years ago. But really nice shooting bow, and happy to have it re-sinewed and back in the field. So maybe I'll take this thing out this fall and see if we can't get us another deer with it. I have to learn to shoot it. It shoots a little higher. Oh, I know the reason why. Because this string is a little bit smaller diameter, and so I'm having to take my my finger tab and put it all the way up against this arrow to hold it on the string. Whereas normally I would have another nock, and I would actually, my shooting tab would be down just a little bit, which would change my launch angle and point my arrow down just a little bit. But since my my tab's all the way up against it, it's my angle's up a little bit, so I'm shooting a little bit higher than I normally would. So I'll build another string for this thing, put another nock point on there, and that'll solve that problem. I really like the profile on this bow. Turned out really nice. Snake skin turned out nice. It's very dark. Alright guys, that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Get out there in the workshop, start scraping on some wood. We'll see you on the next one.